I'm with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, part of DHS.
And my name's Cathy Hall. I'm a solutions architect, but I also am a practice lead for CELA, focusing mostly on IGA and privileged access management.
So the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program, it's been around a while. It was established in 2012, and the intent is to provide a consistent approach to cybersecurity, risk management, and measurement across the federal government, and help with mitigating risk that people find in their agency environments. We do this a few ways. We provide funding for agencies to buy products and tools off of our approved products list, and then we also have services we provide, services and tools that are integrated together. Cathy has worked on one of those teams that helped DHS integrate a number of agencies. And we actually have some other advisory services that CISA does as well. But for CDM, we try to deliver capabilities to the agencies that help them address risks in their environment. The first part we did at DHS, we had a BPA, and then we called Phase 1 and Phase 2, and I'll talk about this evolution. Currently, we're in a process called Defend. It's a multi-year contract that we provide services for a lot of different agencies. The way we arrange the capabilities we deliver under CDM is we have a dashboard at the top, and there's two dashboards actually. There's a federal dashboard that has summary information, and then each agency that we provide services for, and currently there's about 100 agencies that are part of the CDM program. Each of those agencies have a dashboard in their environment. And that dashboard is intended to show risks in these areas that I'll talk about now. And their circles here are concentric circles because we've delivered the capabilities in a phased approach. We started with asset management, and that is hardware asset management, software asset management, vulnerability management, and configuration settings management on devices. That was called Phase 1. I came on board to help do Phase 2. That's identity and access management. And we'll talk more about how we delivered the first sets of capabilities under identity and access management under that capability. Currently, under Defend, we're expanding into network security management. And that means a lot of things, right? So it's helping agencies understand and perform incident response management, helping them do ongoing assessment so they don't have to do just checklists, that they can have some tools that help them automate the process of assessing their environments and then having risk management with that. And ongoing authorization. So every agency has to have an authority to operate their systems, and this will help also with authorizations. And beyond that, defining boundaries, protecting boundaries is all part of the network security management. And finally, moving farther to the left, and we call that design and building security, are the aspects that we'll do under this Defend task order. All of this is done in order to perform data protection. And the reason data protection is at the heart of this is it is central to what you have to do. Protecting data is what most industries and most companies, and certainly in the government, we really have to do to protect our sensitive assets. But you also need significant amounts of capabilities from above before you can really start addressing protecting data. So CDM took a path to get here. Before CDM, we had FSMA compliance, and there were checklists and 853 compliance audits and stuff. CDM came along to try to automate asset management, automate account management, and measure those things. And we call that developing cyber hygiene, and that's the part of CDM where we're at currently. In the future, we all need to move to a threat-based approach. And through CDM, and there's other initiatives at DHS that are occurring, one of them is called GovCar. It helps look at the different threat environments that we're operating in and what is the best way to address risks in that environment. So prioritizing those risks by doing threat analysis. And we have some scoring methods that are coming into the dashboard that will help agencies understand what things they need to priority in addressing risk. So also, a few weeks ago, OMB also helped us modernize ICAM in the federal government, right? And it really changes a lot of the aspects about how the federal government has looked at identity and access management. We moved from a life cycle of the credential, and I don't have my PIV card on me, it's in my pocket, but it is the PIV card is the primary mechanism we use to manage people primarily, and Cathy will talk about that in a minute. But moving from a credential management to a life cycle of the identity, and that involves changing some things. We had LOAs assigned on this card, right? And we're moving to 863 has a more advanced model, right? It has a more nuanced model about identity assurance, authenticator assurance, and when you're interoperating with other organizations, federation assurance, and incorporating that into the identity lifecycle model. And all that is doing, do risk management on that, right? Maybe runtime risk assessments as people interact with organizations and with applications. More authenticators. The world has developed many more authenticators. The smart card doesn't work in all environments, so we'll be looking at adopting other kind of authenticators as appropriate. And then federation, as I mentioned. So in most agencies, if I was at DHS, if I was to go work at USDA, I'd probably have to get another credential to get on their environment. And we want to be able to do federation. That's the way we want to move in the future. So Cathy is going to talk a little bit now about the first thing we did under CDM for users.
So yeah, I was the architect on the cred management part of CDM, which was part of that identity access management circle that Ross talked about earlier. And one of the first things we wanted to do is really get a sense of who was on the network. And in order to do that, we needed to build what CDM calls the master user record, or what, because we were implementing SailPoint, what SailPoint likes to call the identity cube. So we really needed to know who was on the network. We needed to tie that to an individual heartbeat. And in order to pull in, we needed to pull in attributes about those users that told us whether or not they should be on the network. So as we talk through the different areas, I'm going to kind of use the onboarding process to get through it. So the trust area is really that identity assurance piece. Is this person who they say they are? And have we performed a suitable background check to know that they should be anywhere near our network? So we need to be able to pull from those systems that hold that data to say this person has, in government terms, there's a NAC or a NACI that was performed in order to tell us that this person is suitable for government work. And then after we get that suitability permission, the next thing we do is we issue them a PIV card. So a lot of places, they issue the PIV cards themselves. A lot of them use a shared service like GSA's US Access. And we needed to pull the information off of those PIV card issuance systems to say that this person has a PIV card and this is the PIV card that's associated with that user. The next thing that's also important, for one, you see the requires on the cred to the trust. In order to be issued a PIV card, you have to have had a suitability check that you passed with flying colors. On the priv side, so everybody that accesses your network gets a PIV card, but not everyone that accesses your network gets privileges. We wanted to be able to identify those users with privileges, so we want to make sure that anyone that uses those privileges, so system administrators, network administrators, were using that PIV card to get to that privilege. So in order to get privs, we needed to make sure that you had a cred. And then the fourth piece here, the behave, is really around, do you understand what behaviors you're allowed to do on that network? So have you been, are you aware of best practices in cybersecurity? Have you taken your annual cybersecurity awareness training? And any other trainings that tie to the privileges that you have. So there are some trainings that you want to give to some of your more high privilege users.
So in order to implement the MER, we started out with 2 task orders. And the cred management was the first task order we thought we were going to do. It's about making sure that all the users on the network, all the unprivileged users, have a PIV card. But before we issued that, there had been a little hiccup in the federal government. They'd had a breach, and there was a cyber sprint that was performed to help mitigate some of the risk that was involved with that. And out of that cyber sprint, OMB asked the CDM program to accelerate the priv management capability, the privilege users. They came out that was actually a very important thing we have to do, right? So move that to the left. And we were able to respond to that, and that was the first task order we actually issued under phase 2, was the priv management task order. And the priv management task order, it addressed the strong authentication gaps And it did it by using a proxy solution for those places where you couldn't use the PIV card natively. So the government would always like to use the PIV card for these privileged users, but that doesn't work everywhere, right? So best practice in the industry is to use a PAM solution, and you log into the PAM solution with a strong authentication, and then you can use a session management to the device to manage the device. So we're in the process of completing all the agencies implementing that solution, and the Credit Manager Task Order was also put into play, and that is primarily used in Active Directory. You log onto the network, you do Control-Alt-Delete, use your PIV card to get access to the network. And both of those capabilities put in place kind of sets the table stakes for using the MER. All this, all this MER data will be measured from those sources and fed up to these dashboards in this first step.
So the building of the MER is a read-only activity. We were connecting to the sources of data that had information about whether or not somebody's background check was completed, whether or not they were issued a PIV, and whether it was still valid, and really all the other areas that I was talking about earlier. A lot of agencies as part of credit management said, well, you know, it's great that you're telling me that these people are out of compliance, but what can I do about it? And so a number of agencies really wanted to take it to the next step and automate the granting of this privilege to the people who comply, and the removal of privilege to the people that are out of compliance. So in the SailPoint world and in our world, it's called the join, remove, reliever process. It's around what do I do when somebody is onboarded? What do I do when all of those checks that I can see in the 4 boxes are met and I want to grant them access to my network? How do I get somebody access to AD like that versus having to send out more tickets and wait another week or 2 before they really have access to that network? And then how do I also, more importantly, really take away that access when they no longer need it? How do I make sure that they're, I didn't realize they were animated.
I should have done that better.
How do I take away that access either when their job doesn't require it anymore, or, and something we've seen in a lot of agencies, how do I take it away when that person is no longer supporting my agency at all? And then, of course, the PAM integration that we talked about here, really, a PAM tool is great at being that policy enforcement point, the thing that allows people to get that access to the privilege accounts when they need it. But governing those PAM accounts is an incredibly important piece. And so as part of Defend, we're starting to integrate those 2 tools a little more fully, using the PAM module that comes with SailPoint, using the SCIM servers that a lot of the PAM providers are now supporting. We're now able to tell when people are using privileged access, whether they should be using that privileged access.
And you can tell that these ILM tools have a lot of capabilities built into them, and we plan on using many of those capabilities over time. It's quite of an eye chart, but if you take a look at this later, it really is all very meaningful information about how you can help people reduce risk in their environment by using all these tools together.
And really the purpose of this is really to help agencies get to the mecca of security right now, which is the zero trust security model. You know, everybody is still trying to get to least privilege, but what we really want to be able to do is sort of integrate all of our security measures across all of the different landscapes we have, the user landscape, the application landscape, the data landscape, and the network landscape, to ensure that every transaction that happens on our network is being provided a level of context, but that context first and foremost is some level of assurance that that identity that is performing that transaction is who they say they are. So of course the strong authentication principles are key to that. But another important part is feeding more context to those enforcement decisions. So advanced analytics or really a lot of other tools that can feed that more context to those decisions at runtime. We have fed those runtime enforcement points with some of this information about their background checks and all of the stuff that I talked about in the MER, but really adding more advanced analytics to this engine to allow us to see at real time when we're allowing people to perform a transaction what they should be allowed to do. In order to be able to get to this area, we really do need to establish some strong identity governance strategies. We need to make sure that we have a set of trustable identities. A lot of people like to say trusted identities, but again, that makes it seem like trusted identities mean there's an intrinsic trust, and in a zero trust model, what we're really trying to do is remove intrinsic trust from our network. We're not supposed to just have the one authentication check and now they can do whatever they want in our network. We want to make sure that we're we're providing that context to every decision, every transaction on that network. And we want, in order to do that, we need to know who it is that we want to trust and that they are trustable. We want to establish these centralized privileged access management capabilities because while we want every transaction to be validated, we want that context fed to every transaction across the network. You can't boil the ocean. You want to focus on those privileged transactions first. So you really want to have some kind of centralized privileged access management strategy so you have policies enforced centrally or across the board. The same policies are managed everywhere. And then application access is also crucial. So again, we focus on privileged access first. We focus on the low-hanging fruit of privilege, which is infrastructure access, but then you really want to apply this then to all of your applications as well. And then what I said before, which is context to these decisions that we make, the context to the enforcement points that are allowing these transactions to happen are fed by advanced analytics.
So CDM really is a very holistic approach to risk in agency environments. You know, no matter how you get access to your agency environment, whether that's defined by firewalls in your legacy environment or your services you're providing in cloud, you have to have some way to identify when people come to your trusted area, right? And find ways to establish trust. The zero trust model we talked about is one good way to think about this, right? And then the networks need to be under your control, and they probably shouldn't be as static as they have in the past. One of the things we learned is that flat networks that are open with, that are open, you can do lateral motion a lot. So taking a risk-based approach to network is going to be really key to how we protect networks in the future. And CDM is it going to be introducing some capabilities under this network security management to help segment networks. Applications is really important, and CDM has a concept that the federal government has that CDM will be adopting about high-value assets, and we'll be identifying applications that are high-value applications, and we'll be determining the best way to secure those high-value applications, and it will probably be in a trusted manner. We'll do that. And then the two basic foundations we talked about in the beginning, users, right? Knowing your users, having a risk-based approach to managing those users is critically important to managing your network. And then the endpoints. There's an explosion of endpoint devices. This is an opportunity and a risk for agencies, right? So I have a mobile phone that I actually have a derived PIV credential on. So I have a PIV credential. The system derived a credential on my phone. So it's a strong assurance credential, just like on my PIV card. But I can use that mobile device to interact with my, in this case, my email service to get access without having to, try to use my PIV card, but have the same level of assurance. There's going to be a lot more endpoints in the world than we see today. And some of them are not going to be physical endpoints. They're going to be robotic automation. And OMB 1917 talks about expanding the way we look at identity lifecycle to include devices and include RPA. And CDM will be helping in that regard as well. Anyway, it's a holistic view to the whole risk management model in agencies. And as I said in the beginning, while I'm focusing here on identity and access management, CDM has capabilities, and we'll be measuring and putting tools in place and measuring risk across the entire realm of all of these different functional areas. So I think that we have plenty of time. We have some questions. So the DEFEND task order is a multi-year task order. I think it runs through 2023, I believe, and there's nothing that says it has to end there. That's just the authorization that we have today. I have a phased approach plan that for the DEFEND program that I've presented to the leadership, and it kind of depends on funding and demands as to how we do that. But this DEFEND task order is a very flexible task order, and we have a 5-year period that we'll be, from now, executing on.
I think it's important to note that this is across all of the civilian agencies for the whole federal government. So it can take a while to get everybody on board and everybody to understand the importance of this. And I mean, hundreds of agencies, 26 or more CFO Act agencies. So we're talking about some of the bigger ones that include all the roll-up components. So it's it's a walk and then run, I think is what you were showing in this earlier slide.
Yeah, and the questions, I can elaborate a little bit about how it's being delivered too. So the Defend task order is delivered through what we call groups, and so it's a number of agencies in a grouping, and there's an integrator that will manage that task for the entire period of the Defend award for that group. In addition, there's a shared service that CDM also offers. So there's 26 CFO Act agencies, and those agencies are fairly large, generally speaking, and they're in these groups. And then there's a lot of agencies that are not part of the CFO Act, the smaller agencies, and some not so small. And we have a CDM shared service that we put these tools and we provide the services for them in that shared service so that they don't have to put all this in their infrastructure, which is often constrained, that they can access through the shared service. That task order will be, there's one coming to the end, and then it'll be a new one that'll help carry that, and we'll be modernizing that shared service and probably putting many of these capabilities that don't exist in that shared service today in the shared service in the future. Any other questions? Sir?
Hey, Ross, what kind of, so the premise of CDM is we're going to buy, best-in-class products and actually get them to all the civilian agencies. Some agencies are saying this is great, I can put all this new stuff in and replace the old things that are a little creaky. Others maybe can't replace legacy so well, or maybe they just did something 2 years before CDM and they don't want to. What is the penetration been across the agencies? What are you able to share in terms of what percentage of civilian agencies are adopting everything you can do with CDM and identity?
Some agencies have had their own tools, and I can tell you that under the Cred Management, the Priv Management task orders, we had some agencies, first going in, I said, we're not here to rip and replace. That doesn't do anybody value, right? We're here to augment what you have in place, and we can work with your capabilities if you want to do that, right? And some agencies had, like, for instance, a lifecycle management product, and we integrated with that lifecycle management product. But quite frankly, most agencies needed the tools we had to bring, and they asked and they adopted the ones that we brought to the table. I think some agencies made some decisions to make some enterprise purchases, where they had disparate tools across their enterprise, and it made better sense for them not to have to manage all of these, since we're going to be reporting up from these tools, and they probably consolidate on some. But some agencies still have a disparate mix of tools in place, and CDM works with those agencies. Sometimes we ask them to do the complex integration, and sometimes we take that complex integration on ourselves. We really try to work with agencies where they are. We take into consideration the type of capabilities an agency has, because not every agency has the same capabilities in terms of resources, right? Or in terms of maturity. And some of the people in the room here are agencies that I work with, and they have a very high level of maturity, and we're really pleased to help them. We're not kind of leading those guys, they're leading us to where we need to go, and that's a great partnership. Whereas other agencies don't have that same maturity, and we kind of lead them to where they need to be. Overall, it's been a really great partnership, and I'm really, really pleased with the way it's working with the agencies. And this CDM task order under Defend is even much more flexible than it was in the beginning. We let agencies can come and tell CDM, I need this capability. It may not be a thing that CDM had in our kind of common roadmap, right? But if an agency needs it, our job is to help mitigate risk in agencies. So we work with the agencies. There's a lot of tools on our approved products list, a lot more than I'm going to ever be installing into an agency. So an agency can say, I need that tool, and I need integrators' help to get that solution in place. They can buy it themselves if they have resources and money, or they can request, and if we have funding for that capability, we can fund that. So there's a lot of flexibility built into the CDM program, and it's all due to this Defend task order, which is a really, I'll say, a model task order in the federal government, or how to put large-scale services that the entire federal government can use and deliver it in a very flexible manner to meet needs of agencies.
I can use Cred Management as an example. We had a number of agencies that had identity access management tooling already, and because there are a number of APIs that are being standardized, we've been using those APIs to integrate. So they saw the value in bringing in SailPoint and bringing in that the common way of pulling this data into a common platform and feeding it up to a common dashboard. So, if you had an identity management tool, we could create a SCIM connector into it, pull it into SailPoint, and then help you feed it up to the dashboard. So it's automated, so you're not running around with spreadsheets trying to get those metrics that you're trying to feed to DHS on a yearly basis. So almost everyone installed and configured SailPoint in some capacity. even ones that had identity management tools saw the capabilities of it and said, hey, maybe we want to start to move in that direction. We want to start to move our data over. And they funded continuing projects to do that, either through Defend or through their own contract vehicles. But every agency that we worked with, almost every agency that we worked with, ended up putting SailPoint in to some degree.
So if anybody has any questions, if you're a vendor in the room and you're interested in doing business with the CDM program, there's an approved products list. I'm glad to tell you how you get on that list and encourage everybody to do so if you think you might have a product that we can use in the cybersecurity realm in the federal government. Thank you.